Hello, I have another episode of this production log for you. At the end of the last one, I said that I'd finished the cockpit and I was going to start on the second section, which is down this tunnel. So I just want to show you the block out of that section first so that you can see a comparison of what it was like before. So if I go down this tunnel into here, and you can see the block out here. So there's some crates over here, cryogenic storage tanks, some smaller lockers here. There's a hatch down on the bottom that goes to the airlock, and there's a window as well on the bottom. And then here's the hatch and the tunnel that we just came through. So that's the block out, and I will load up what it looks like now. Okay, here we are in roughly the same spot. So you can see the storage crates there, cryo tanks, lockers, and the hatch on the bottom, and there's the window. I think first we'll just take a look at this hatch. I modeled this hatch in Fusion 360, and then I made a few bits and pieces in Max, like the handle. Let's just jump over to Max, and we can get a better view of it there. This is the first hatch that I've made for this project that actually has to open. There's a few shots of it. I think 2 shots where it opens and closes. So it had to function. It has to have the hinge, which is over on this side, and I needed to do 2 sides of it. So underneath here is in the airlock, and you can see it has the same handle as on the top, and it has the sides as well. Now this part here actually won't move because that's part of the structure that it sits in. So let me hide that. Okay, that's the side of the hatch. So that's what you see when it swings open and closed. This airlock is based on the Kibo airlock in the International Space Station. It's not meant to be an exact copy, it's just roughly based on it. There are a few shots of the bottom, but you don't really see the bottom of it as close as the top. So I spent most of my time working on this part. And that has an 8K texture on it because there's a shot that's quite close up when the characters are interacting with each other through this window. Next up, I'll just talk about these crates here. You'll probably recognize the branding, and I thought I would play with existing branding just to make the world that this film is set in feel more familiar and accessible. Cryo tanks are fairly simple. They were made in Marvelous Designer. I can't show you the Marvelous Designer scene because I had to do that on my personal computer. I don't have a Marvelous Designer license on my work PC at the moment, but it's pretty basic stuff. Next up, let's take a look at these lockers over here. I'll show you my reference for these. I was on a plane. There was a little delay in disembarkation, and I was at the very back, and I snapped these photographs of the storage lockers that they have at the back of the aircraft. The nice thing about these is that you can tell they've been used so many times because they are covered with stickers and labels, and some of them have been peeled off. Some of them they just stuck on top of the old ones, especially these ones here in particular. And you can see all the old adhesive here of some of the stickers that they peeled off. So I wanted to get this because it really tells a lot of story, I think. I'll jump into Substance Painter. I won't go into detail about this setup. Maybe I'll make a separate video on this because I think it's quite a handy setup. But there are 4 individual assets here, and then I made 2 versions. If we just jump back to Max, you can see that there are 2 different materials on them. And if you actually look carefully in Unreal Engine, you can see that there is some repetition, but you wouldn't really notice it because I've spaced them out so that none of the identical ones are beside each other. So this bottom one here is the same as this one here. This middle one here is the same as this one here. These tall blue ones are all unique. And then this sort of mid-sized one in the middle is the same as this one on the bottom left. Next up, we have some hoses and pipes, not quite as many as in the cockpit. I might do a few more, and these are largely assets that I've reused from the cockpit. If you haven't seen it, I did a little series on how to do a lot of these hoses and wires and pipes and so on. The only one that I made from scratch for this section was this very wide hose down here, which I haven't made a material for just yet, but I will soon. These ones were simulated in Marvelous Designer as a straight sections and then deformed along a path. Now, you do have to be careful if you're doing this, because if you simulate something and then you deform it, strictly speaking, it's not simulated anymore. So you can get away with it if the deformation is gentle. But I use this same asset up in the cockpit, and I'll just show you. Now, I don't think this appears in any shot, but I put one up here, and you can see that has quite a tight curve on the end, and it just doesn't look right. And the reason is because there should be compression wrinkles on the inside of this radius here, but there aren't, because it was simulated in a straight line and then deformed along a path. So you have to be careful when you're doing this, because if your deformation is too extreme, it just completely breaks the simulation and it will look a bit weird. So either use gentle deformations or else keep these far in the background where they won't be noticed. So I'm going to do a few more hoses and small wires as well here, because it just needs a bit more stuff in the scene. And I just noticed as well that this hose has not been shelled, so it's thin, so I'll have to shell that. And then as for the walls, I reused some of the assets from the cockpit, like these struts here. The plastic parts are new, but they're quite simple. They're just subdivision modeling and shelled. And then we also have this sort of browny orangey padding. I wanted to avoid just straight walls. I think I was inspired by some of the work by the late Paul Pepera. He has these really cool science fiction renders that you make a lot of use of this simulated fabric padding. And I just realized as well when I saw this image just now that it kind of looks a lot like this composition wise. That was definitely not intentional, or maybe I was subconsciously inspired, not sure. I also had some reference of aircraft insulation like this, so that's what I was going for. In general, with the walls and the structure, there are three main materials. There's this painted steel, which is grey, and then you have this pale off-white kind of grey greenish molded plastic, and then you have this padding, which at the moment is an orangey brownish desaturated colour. I might change that, and that's it. I don't want to have too many materials, and I think these colours work well together. Most of these assets are textured in Substance Painter, but in a few cases I've made tileable versions of these materials, of these textures I should say, that I can just paste on small little things that I don't need to UV and bring into Substance Painter. Then up here you'll see it's the same. It's this plastic and then painted steel. And I think colours wise, to be honest, I'm not really an expert at this, but like neutral colours and then a little bit of blue and a little bit of earth tones, it works well together. So I'm nearly finished this, I think. Next, what I have to do is finish the materials, especially for these hoses. Just add in a few more little bits, like wires trailing around, a few more little props here and there. And then I'm going to move on to the airlock, which is just through this hatch. So that's the block out of the airlock. And then I start working on the exterior. I don't need to do the exterior of the entire ship, because the only shots that you really see close up are just outside the airlock. So that will make my life a bit easier. One of the very first steps that I did in the production of this project was to do a kind of block out of the animation with the characters and the blocked out environment. And so now I can see what that looks like with the actual environment. And one thing I've noticed about this section in particular is that a lot of the shots in this section use long focal lengths. And I didn't do that on purpose. It's just something I noticed when I watched the animation recently. And it means that actually a lot of the work that I've done in this part is invisible to the camera. And more importantly, I think the audience, so they would probably get very disoriented in this section. I'll have to go back and reframe a lot of these shots using shorter lenses. And I think maybe at the start I might put in a shot at the very start that just quickly goes through that section and through the tunnel up to the cockpit, just so the audience knows where these two sections are in relation to each other, and how big they are and how close they are and so on. I think that would help a lot. What you're seeing here is through the cameras that I've set up, and this shot here is in the airlock. That's why it's still block out. But yeah, that's something I'll have to revisit, I think, probably after I do the airlock. But yeah, I'm going to wrap up this video now, and hopefully I'll make the next one sooner. So I'll wrap up this video with that, and I will see you in the next one.